So good afternoon to you all. It's a pleasure to be here. It's not obvious to have an economist speaking in this audience. If you say so, Mira, nobody's going to argue with you, certainly. I want to praise the organizers, Mira, and all the others. This is a tremendously timely topic. It's so important to bring people from different perspectives together to discuss it. Clearly, this topic is going to dominate more and more the public agenda, and so having these international meetings is incredibly important. I will try to give you some perspective, a wider perspective from economics. There are many different ways to tackle the issue. I will take a particular angle to it. We don't have much time, so I will be as crisp as possible in it. So what's the big picture? Essentially, if you look back in history, and you look at all the main parameters, population, economic growth, health, you name it, it's very boring until 200 years ago. Essentially, everything is flat, with very small fluctuations, right? Population and GDP and GDP per capita and life expectancy, everything looks flat. And then 200 years ago, things start to change in a major way. They take off with the Industrial Revolution that started in the late 18th century, early 19th century. And since then, we have been in this tremendous pace of change that is really unprecedented, of course, and that brings humanity to a completely different place, including this issue of healthy aging, which would have been an inconceivable topic not that long ago. Just to give you a sense of the magnitude of these changes, in the past 100 years, the GDP per capita has increased worldwide, has increased 500%. Now, this is per capita. At the time when the population, at the same time, increased from 1.6 billion to over 7 billion. So it's an unbelievable pace of economic growth together with population growth and so forth. Now, what are the forces shaping this tremendous change? Essentially, there are two main forces and a third one lagging behind. One, of course, is science and technology. This is the essence of the Industrial Revolution. First, the second, the third, the fourth. Now we are talking about the AI revolution, the artificial intelligence revolution. The first one was, of course, the steam engine. This is a force that essentially has acquired a life of its own, feeds itself more and more. In Hebrew, there is this expression, golem shekam al yotzro, this golem that raised above the master. And now, this technology is controlling us, perhaps, and not the other way around. But that's one force. We are part of it, the universities and so forth, propelling it forward. This is, one powerful trend. The second one, closely interrelated, is demography. Demography. Demography has this power. It's like an iceberg. It moves slowly, but you cannot stop it. And you better don't try to crash into it, okay, because it's going to crash you. And so demography also has changed dramatically, as we know, as a consequence of advances in science, technology, hygiene, and so forth. What's called the Great Demographic Transition, from a situation whereby for millennia, the pattern was very high birth rates and very high death rates, so that the population really didn't move much, except for what we call Malthusian periods, in the name of Malthus, right? That there will be some burst of economic growth, and then population will accelerate, and they will revert to subsistence level, and so forth and so on. So that was the situation, and it's amazing how that was a almost permanent situation along history with fluctuations, to a situation where, because of an initial decline in death rates, because primarily of hygiene in the 19th century, and then advances in medicine, and so forth and so on, nutrition, etc., the death rates start to decline. Birth rates adjust to that because you don't need to bring so many children knowing that only a fraction will survive, more will survive. You need to bring up less children, okay? And there is this parallel process of declining both. At the beginning, population keeps rising because the decline of birth rates lags after the decline in death rates, okay? But then eventually the population stabilizes and even declines. That's called the big demographic transition or transformation. And if you look at the charts, it's unbelievable. I mean, we are now, as you probably know, the average birth rate at the OECD countries is 1.7, well below replacement level, which is 2.1. Incidentally, you are here in Israel. Israel is a complete, absolute outlier in the world. We are the only country in the world that has a birth rate, it's not a birth rate, it's a fertility rate of 3.1 children per woman, having the only country with that fertility rate with the level of economic development what we have. And furthermore, there are very few countries outside Africa and some Arab countries, regardless of economic development, that have such an incredibly high fertility rate, a complete outlier. And if you want to have the complete picture, this doesn't belong to the theme, but it's interesting to know. For cocktail parties, you can brag, with these kind of sort of factoids that you know. The rate of participation of women in the workforce in Israel is amazingly high. So the combination of a very high fertility rate and a very high rate of labor force participation of women is unique in the world. But aside from Israel, okay, you have this decline, dramatic decline in birth rates, together with decline in death rates and, of course, life expectancy that keeps growing at a certain pace. We all know that. Now, the third leg, I said these are two main forces. The third one is institutions. What we mean by institutions in academia is not a university, that's maybe called an institution. Institutions essentially are the rules of the game, the rule of law. If you wish, in the context we're talking about, the pension system is an institution, okay? The way society is organized, the system of government, and so these are institutions. And so you have technology running very fast, almost uncontrolled. You have demography following and extremely powerful but slower. And then you have institutions moving very slowly. There is a lot of inertia in institutions to an amazing extent. And what that creates is a tension between the changes that technology and demography are producing and are calling for, and the ability of society, of the institutions, to adapt and facilitate and so forth. The issue we are discussing of aging, dependency ratios, healthy aging and so forth, precisely fall into that category. The inability of our societies to understand these forces and to say, hey guys, We need to change. We cannot keep going with the retirement system the way it is, with the retirement age as it is, with savings as they are, with investments in health, well-being, and so forth that start very late when you are already there and not much early on, and so forth. So what is called for is a dramatic change in perceptions, understand this fact, and proceed accordingly. So this is kind of the focus of what I want to talk about. Now, just one thing about institutions. Sometimes we say economic growth, technology, etc., and we think of it as a deterministic kind of process. Well, institutions, look at Venezuela, look at Greece. How can it be that in the 21st century, when essentially you have all the knowledge you want, you have all the technology you want, in order to be able to lead normal lives and growth and so forth, you have failed countries that bring misery to millions of people because of institutional failures of that sort. So that, that sort of contrast gives you a sense. Sometimes you need in the Bible, the Genesis starts with the first sentence of Genesis is that, Vayehi or, there was the light. Why? Because there was, before that, darkness. So sometimes you need the darkness to appreciate the light. And that's a kind of okay. So I want to make a claim and then elaborate on that. The current situation by which the longevity keeps increasing and barring a major catastrophe, this is a deterministic process because, your husband will keep doing great research and therefore, we maybe live longer and better lives and so forth. All the advances point in that direction. So this is kind of one sort of process. There's no question that the advances in technology in particular, in artificial intelligence, will make and already making many occupations redundant, obsolete, and so forth. So, at the same time that we have more people living longer lives that will like to work longer, we have, on the other side, less occupations, at least of that sort, available. And the fact that we saved only so much because we were not prepared for that. Who is going to pay for that? Who is going to pay for our longer lives? The dependency ratio that has been increasing. So fewer working people have to essentially sustain many more dependents and so forth. This system is bankrupt. Not only in the trivial sense of social security is bankrupt, from the actuarial point of view. It bankrupt in the sense that it cannot last, as it's unsustainable the way it is and requires major changes. Now, enter healthy aging. By the way, I was thinking, you were in the Dead Sea. I think this is a good opportunity, Mira. You should put a proposal forward in the Knesset to change the name of the Dead Sea. Something like the Resurrecting Sea or the Healthy Sea. I mean, you have been there, everything is healthy there. Why dead? I mean, this belongs to a different time and age. Yeah? Okay. Yeah. No, but go more positive than that. It's not only not dead, but it's anyway.
No, but I think about aging, that wonderful exercise.
Yeah.
Aging.
Exactly.
Really.
No, absolutely. So let me now go back to healthy aging. And again, I want to make a statement. You probably, most of you heard of Hobbes, Thomas Hobbes, one of the greatest English philosophers. He, by the way, lived to the age of 90-something. He was very old, late 18th century, early no, late 17th century, early 18th century. He, in his famous book Leviathan, he introduced this sentence that has stuck with us ever since. And he says, life is solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. Okay, that's a sentence that stuck. By the way, most people know just the later past, brutish and short. It's worse than that. It's solitary, it's poor, it's nasty, it's brutish and short. This is true for many people in the world, even in America. You were referring to living conditions and so forth. He coined that phrase. But when you think about it, for the first time in history, we have a chance to get away from that curse. And this is something that really we should pay attention to. Because when he wrote that, it was absolutely true for 99.9% of humanity, and it kept being true for the vast majority of humanity, and for a big chunk of it is still true. But we have the opportunity to live long, meaningful lives in communities and get away from these klalas, we say in Hebrew, these curse. Think about it. Really, it's not a trivial kind of statement to make. Moreover, we think of life essentially as a rat race, okay? Stages, every time, right? I mean, you are born, you have to go to the best kindergarten. I presume that you read the New York Times or whatever, the Financial Times, right? They arrested a ring of parents, famous, and so forth, accused of bribing great universities in the US. Northwestern was not there, luckily, in order to have their sons and daughters get admitted, okay? Amazing, including Stanford, including Yale, and so forth. Some other university I never heard of. I said, poor these guys, I mean, they have to bribe the worst universities even, okay? But what I'm telling you, what I'm saying is it's an incredible race. And then you are done with that, and the first job and the second job, and then helping your children and so forth. So they say, wait, does it ever end? I mean, at some point you say, okay, now meaning, okay, the meaning of all that, now this is something left for philosophers. No, we have now a chance to make our lives meaningful beyond that, beyond the career, beyond those. But in order for that to happen, this has to start at day one, and not at age 65 or 68 or 60. And this is something that has not sunk in. When we think about healthy aging, we think of aging. So we think that the topic is confined to older people. Not so. Now we understand better than ever before the trajectory, what happens at the very early stages in life will set the course for everything else. I've been doing work, a lot of work, on early childhood education, and actually what brought me here is that fact. I don't deal with aging, but it's the same topic. And I will mention one Nobel Prize in Economics, Jim Heckman from Chicago University, Nobel Prize in Economics, not for this, but for econometrics, which is highly technical. But for the past 15 years, has been doing amazing work on the results of very early interventions in life, like Head Start and so forth in the US, through the lives of people 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years, 50 years hence. And the results are stunning. Control groups, okay? Right interventions at age 2. And then you follow them up like the rats that you showed there, okay, the controls and the others. Every single parameter, health, of course, education, economic status, incarceration, divorce, all of these parameters, straight line related to what happened at age 2, regardless of what happens later on from a statistical point of view. And then it's not, this is Jim Heckman, okay? And there's a huge body of research supporting that. Okay, so what that means is that when you do things right at the very beginning, when we are still malleable, where we are really open to development in many directions, when things have not settled in you, the plasticity of the brain, the ability to learn, it makes a huge difference when you hear at age 6 months a vocabulary of 300 words or 1,000 words. Regardless, you don't understand as a child. It doesn't matter. It sets the course of development of your skills. And these skills are generic. And we live in a time when generic skills are going to be the key, not the imparting knowledge here at the university. That we can do from our phones. But the ability to learn, the ability to acquire new information and so forth, that is the key. You know, I presume all of you that deal with these issues, that the correlation and apparently also causation between economic status and health is very, very strong. And indeed, the more we investigate it, the more we realize that. I just pull out a figure that really stunned me. I wasn't aware that there's a huge difference between men and women. The gradient is much steeper for men than for women in that respect. The difference in expected age at death for 40 years olds, okay, belonging to the lowest quantile, economic quantile, and the highest, in the US, 10. It's unbelievable, 10. Okay, it's huge. For women, it's less. In Israel, it's 4. Okay, so we know there is much more inequality in the US. But think of it, 10 years time difference in life expectancy at age 40. So there's a tremendous. Now, we know, go one step further, that economic status is intimately related to education. And we know that the sort of education you will get is intimately related to what happened to you in early childhood. So extrapolate what happens to you decades later. It's already written on the wall much earlier on. Okay? So where does this all lead us? Well, of course, you cannot say to this audience, well, too bad you didn't do the right thing. Too bad for you. Okay? Your grandchildren may benefit from what we know now. No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that you need a two-pronged strategy. One is indeed do what we do, which is research to try to directly affect the quality of life, the health, and so forth. Put through our resources there, fantastic. I mean, this will have wider implications and so forth. But then do two more things that are not done now. One, remodel institutions to accommodate these huge changes. In at least 5 countries that I know of, including, of course, Japan, the Netherlands, Sweden, Germany, people at age 65 want to continue working, but in flexible hours, flexible jobs, they are ready to take a big cut in payment. And there is a correlation between well-being and the fact that you are working and being productive and so forth. The current systems don't allow for that, or very few countries. Academia allows for that in the US, not here, by the way, although here you can manage because this is Israel, Nothing is definite, never, it's at the airport they always have a problem. Final is a relative term with the schedule. So that's kind of crucial. Savings. You can, the awareness of how much you need to save cannot start at age 30, 35. It has to start much earlier because there's no way you can accumulate as much as that. And early on, putting resources early age, not just from 0 to 6, as I'm putting the emphasis. The acquisition of habits of exercise, of nutrition, they again have a lot of inertia. If you do it right at the beginning, that's it. You don't need to later on try to instill in all this, like me, behaviors that are alien to me. Much more difficult to do that. Communities is crucial. Solitary, Hobbes said, solitary, brutish, and so forth. That's very much part of the unhealthy aging. But communities have to be cultivated. You cannot all of a sudden, put a person in a community that is a convenience. It's because of convenience and economic considerations, and not because you really have a bond to the community. We have neglected communities. Our societies are disconnected. Individualism has become a disease, which is not very different from dementia, if you wish. We need to do something about it. That should be at the forefront of agenda for healthy aging, not as a side comment. It's not as, you will forgive me, Dvora. I will say something which is real. I mean, it's when you show the advances in it's not implants, but growing tissues and so forth, it captures the imagination. It's like science fiction. You say, wow, this is it. This is the ultimate, this is the holy grail. It is, but it doesn't mean that investing in things that are less sexy, like developing communities, is less important. But we don't really look at that, It's not in our agendas. So what I'm saying is that there is really much more, there should be much more to the agenda on aging, on healthy aging, than the things that are at the surface the most exciting. And barring those things, I doubt very much that the advances in medicine per se will do the job. Because as we know, the body is a very complex system. So you may improve your knee, but then if the other sides of the systems are not functioning well, there will be it won't work. I mean, the person is one entity. And so that's kind of what I want to bring to the table. And I hope very much that in the next conference at the Dead Sea, there will be also room for economists to speak about. No, I'm not complaining. It's okay. Thank you very much.
Question? Okay.
You said that the average number of births for adult women was.
Yes.
You said to divide that by the.
Yes. One of the very surprising facts is that although Haredim, ultra-Orthodox, they have many more, because their weight in the population is, at this point of the total population, is around 9%. The 3.1 is driven not by that, although it influences the Well, it goes from 2.8 or 2.9 to 3.1 with the Haredim. So the real mystery and the real outlier is my daughters. That, they already have 2, they want to have 3. Okay? So that's the point. And the point is that it has become a norm for secular Jews. And in fact, the number of children born to secular or what we call traditional Jews has been increasing for 20 years. I mean, this is really like a mystery because at the same time as education and so for all the parameters that work against, okay, in most countries, here it's the other way around. Interesting.
I have a question about the evolution of wagon and how the development of authorities or
Yeah.
young children visually as fascinating. Their friends now, they often say their friends are big numbers. Their friends are people they know. I just want to back these realizations are not just the demographics are changing. Context, rapid technological world.
Okay. So that's a very interesting question. Of course, we don't know the answer because we don't know yet the impact of these changes in technology on the topic we're discussing. But what I'm referring to is essentially comes from 2 sources. One is brain studies that show very clearly with PET scans and CT scans and so forth, the development of the brain, different ages, those exposed to different stimuli and so forth. That's very clear, okay? Particularly what really struck me is the exposure to vocabulary at early stages. You can see in the scans, the difference, particularly in the synopsis, the extent to which they develop in the brain and the pruning process and so forth. What happens later on from a social point of view may have an impact, which I couldn't know what it will be. We don't know exactly, what this thing will do to our development, but that does not contradict or cannot take away from the importance of brain development, cognitive abilities at these early stages. Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. No, absolutely. I mean, when I say day one, I meant that. I mean, the more and more evidence of, ranging from, it's unbelievable, violence in the couple before the birth of the child, how that impacts the child, socioeconomic status before and so forth, nutrition, of course. Yes, absolutely. The corporate thing, this is something that is very worrisome. But it will bring us to a different place. I mean, it's the fact that I just mentioned it. It's the fact that, we think of the world as organized in nations. We are citizens in a country. We vote. We have an impact. Okay, corporations respond to our governments. No longer. I mean, these corporations are supranational. Okay, they don't respond to any particular nation. Okay, we feel completely, essentially, left alone. In this struggle. Who knows? Not education. I didn't say education. The very early ages. Right. No, so what happens is that, again, the process historically, okay, is the following. Families had typically many children because it was an insurance. Few survive, okay? That was the pension. The pension was the children, okay? As they realized that more of them survive, they needed less, okay? So they needed to produce less children, so they started to have less children, okay? And so that's the beginning of the process, and at some point it accelerated. Maybe I was misunderstood. What happens with education at early stages is a different phenomena, which essentially is something that is happening a lot in the course of the past few decades. What's the process? As women enter into the labor force, the state didn't provide for essentially daycare centers and institutions to handle what typically not only the mothers, but the extended family will do in terms of educating the children. And so there is a disconnect between, again, institutions lagging behind and the fact that employment of women has expanded so much. And that creates a gap, okay, that needs to be addressed. And, it's really amazing that a lot of this comes from my personal experience. I have now 4 grandchildren, aged 1 to 5. And for me, it's amazing that the difficulties that my daughters are experiencing are no less and even more than the difficulties that we experience. Because there were different institutions, and they have not adapted. How do they overcome that? With a lot of money. But that creates disparities, okay, that are really very problematic. Yes.
First of all, before things to our panel, I think the big percent are men, not only the physical, but talking about the education, from belonging. History, I know, published about total of life, I don't say even any. Don't for men, for example, others. So those communities, not only our discussion on the physical and science,
Yeah.
but how do you change academic? Oh, to make it really look on the, what I'm talking so many, look on the problem and provide the tools for those people who have knowledge and other people, other than their very narrow publication.
Sorry? Eh? So, huge question. I just will say the following. I mean, what I said about institutions lagging behind is true also for universities. Universities are a very rare animal because it's a combination of a bunch of incredibly entrepreneurial people, because, when you do research, you're an entrepreneur all your life. You have all the time to keep renewing yourself and so forth as a researcher. But the institution itself, very conservative, and doesn't move as fast, including in facilitating and promoting true interdisciplinary, and not just, to get a donation from some philanthropist and so forth. Some manage better. You have managed with that institute there at Northwestern. We have a few here in Tel Aviv, not nearly enough. As you know, I am nominated for a particular job here. If I succeed, I may do it. Thank you.